Daniel Brooks was 38 years old when 5 rich parents stood in front of the private school board and called him dangerous. Not unqualified. Not careless. Dangerous. That was the word Mrs. Evelyn Carrington used, standing beneath the polished brass lights of the Ashford Academy Conference Hall, wearing a pearl necklace, a cream suit, and the expression of a woman who had never apologized without expecting applause. "My son no longer feels safe in Mr. Brooks's classroom," she said. A murmur moved through the room. Daniel sat at the end of the long table with his hands folded, his navy suit pressed, his face calm in the way black men learn to make calm look harmless when powerful people are looking for a reason to call it anger. Across from him sat the headmaster, Dr. Henry Vale, a thin man with silver hair and a permanent look of institutional concern. Beside him were 3 board members, 2 school attorneys, and a communications consultant who had already written the press statement in her head. Behind the parents sat other mothers and fathers from Ashford's upper school community, watching as if they had come to witness a disciplinary matter rather than participate in a public execution. Daniel had taught English literature at Ashford Academy for 6 years. He had arrived after 10 years in public schools, a master's degree from Columbia, a reputation for helping quiet students find language, and a belief that literature could teach young people how to recognize themselves before the world named them incorrectly. His classroom was known for difficult books, difficult questions, and a rule written in black marker above the whiteboard: "Speak truthfully. Listen bravely." The students loved him. Most of them. The parents tolerated him until their children started asking questions at dinner. That was the real problem. Not safety. Questions. Daniel had assigned a senior seminar unit called The Cost of Silence. The readings included excerpts from James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, George Orwell, Lorraine Hansberry, and contemporary essays about wealth, power, exclusion, and moral courage. Students wrote reflections about family expectations, social pressure, inheritance, guilt, and fear. They discussed how silence protects injustice when comfort matters more than truth. At first, the parents praised the course. Ashford loved words like courage, leadership, and global citizenship when printed in brochures. Then the students began applying those words at home. William Carrington asked his father why their family foundation donated to scholarship programs but opposed affordable housing near their neighborhood. Sophia Whitcomb asked her mother why the school gala raised money for diversity initiatives while most scholarship students were seated at separate tables. Lucas Pembroke refused to laugh when his uncle made a joke about janitors. Maya Sterling told her parents she did not want to attend the family's annual hunting retreat because she was tired of pretending her grandfather's racist stories were old-fashioned charm. Elliot Graves wrote an essay about how rich children learn politeness as a substitute for morality. That essay started the war. By Monday morning, the headmaster had received 7 parent emails, 3 phone calls from major donors, and 1 message from a trustee asking whether Daniel Brooks was politicizing vulnerable students. By Wednesday, Daniel was asked to submit lesson plans for review. By Friday, a complaint had been filed. By the following Tuesday, he sat before the board while parents who had once smiled at him during fundraisers described him like a threat that had entered through a side door. Mrs. Carrington continued. "Mr. Brooks has created an environment where our children are encouraged to distrust their families, question their upbringing, and view success as something shameful." Daniel looked at William Carrington, sitting in the back row. The boy's face was pale. He would not meet Daniel's eyes. Richard Pembroke, father of Lucas, stood next. He was a real estate developer with a deep voice and the physical confidence of a man used to interrupting people for profit. "My son came home accusing our family business of displacing poor people," he said. "He is 17. He has no understanding of economics." That kind of language did not come from him. It came from this teacher. Lucas sat beside his mother, staring at the floor. Then came Abigail Sterling, who chaired the gala committee and had once told Daniel he was such an inspiration while handing him a plate she assumed he was collecting. "Mr. Brooks has blurred the line between education and indoctrination," she said. "I am not paying $48,000 a year so my daughter can be taught to hate her own family." Daniel breathed slowly. That was another thing black teachers learned: how to breathe through accusation. If he looked wounded, they would call it guilt. If he looked angry, they would call it proof. If he defended himself too forcefully, they would call it aggression. So he sat still and let them reveal themselves. Dr. Vale adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Brooks, you'll have a chance to respond." "Thank you," Daniel said. His voice was steady. That seemed to irritate them. The final speaker was Thomas Graves, a venture capitalist whose son Elliot had written the essay that upset half the parent association. Thomas did not stand. He remained seated, hands clasped on the table, speaking with quiet menace. "My concern is not only academic," he said. "It is psychological. Mr. Brooks appears to have targeted children from successful families and encouraged resentment toward their parents. If this board does not act decisively, there may be consequences beyond this room." That was the cleanest threat of the morning. Daniel looked at him. Thomas Graves smiled faintly. Dr. Vale cleared his throat. "Mr. Brooks, would you like to respond?" Daniel stood. He had prepared remarks. 3 pages. Measured. Professional. Documented. He had brought copies of the syllabus, assignment prompts, reading excerpts, grading rubrics, parent communications, and student feedback forms. He had evidence that no student had been forced to disclose personal information, no political position had been required, no family had been named by him, and no classroom discussion had violated policy. But as he looked around the room, he understood something. They did not need explanation. They needed a confession. Not because he had done anything wrong. Because their comfort required him to admit he had. Daniel placed both hands lightly on the table. "I teach literature," he said. "Literature asks students to examine human choices. Sometimes those choices involve power. Sometimes wealth. Sometimes silence. Sometimes family. My responsibility is not to protect students from discomfort. It is to help them think clearly, speak honestly, and treat one another with dignity while doing both." Mrs. Carrington crossed her arms. Daniel continued. "I did not tell your children what to think about you. I asked them to think." Richard Pembroke laughed under his breath. Daniel turned toward him. "If that feels like an attack, Mr. Pembroke, I cannot repair that by lowering the standard of the class." The room went cold. Dr. Vale shifted in his chair. "Mr. Brooks," he warned softly. Daniel looked back at the board. "I have documentation for every lesson, every assignment, and every parent communication. I welcome a fair review." Thomas Graves leaned back. "And if the review finds you exercised poor judgment?" Daniel met his eyes. "Then I will accept the finding if it is honest." The word honest landed hard. Because everyone in the room understood the condition. Dr. Vale called for a closed session. Daniel was asked to wait outside. He walked into the hallway alone. The Ashford Academy hallway looked like old money pretending to be education: dark wood, framed college acceptance banners, oil portraits of founders, glass trophy cases, spotless floors polished by staff whose children could never afford tuition without charity. Through tall windows, Daniel could see the courtyard where students crossed between classes in blazers and expensive shoes, carrying backpacks that cost more than some families' weekly groceries. He had believed, perhaps foolishly, that a place with so many resources could become better if the right adults were brave. That was why he stayed. Not for the salary, though it was better than public school. Not for the prestige. He stayed for the students who were suffocating politely. The scholarship student who wrote poems but never raised her hand because she had learned not to sound too eager. The anxious heir whose parents had already chosen his college, major, internship, and life. The girl who cried after class because she did not know whether she wanted to be good or simply approved. The boy who wrote, "I think my family loves winning more than me," and then apologized for being dramatic. Daniel knew Ashford was not just a school. It was a factory for polished silence. He had been trying, gently at first, then more directly, to teach students how not to disappear inside it. The door opened. Dr. Vale appeared. His face had the solemn softness of a man about to betray someone while pretending the decision saddened him. "Daniel," he said, "come in." The board did not fire him that day. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. Paid leave. No classroom contact. No communication with students. No public comment. Dr. Vale delivered the decision with language about preserving community trust. Mrs. Carrington looked satisfied. Thomas Graves looked bored. Richard Pembroke checked his phone. Daniel listened. Then he asked one question. "Am I being accused of misconduct?" Dr. Vale hesitated. "We are reviewing concerns regarding professional judgment." That was not my question. The headmaster's mouth tightened. "No formal misconduct finding has been made at this time." "Then I expect that sentence in writing." Dr. Vale blinked. "Yes. Of course." Daniel gathered his folder. As he walked toward the door, he saw the students in the back row. William. Sophia. Lucas. Maya. Elliot. The same children whose parents claimed they had been harmed. They looked ashamed. Not of him. Of themselves. Daniel wanted to tell them it was not their burden. That adults had built this room, not them. That courage often arrived late and shaking. But the board had forbidden student contact. So he only nodded once. Then he left. By sunset, everyone knew. Not the truth. The version. An anonymous parent posted online that Ashford Academy had removed a teacher for radicalizing students against their families. A conservative education blog picked it up. Then local radio. Then television. Daniel's photograph appeared beside phrases like elite school controversy, classroom ideology, and parents demand accountability. No one interviewed him. Dr. Vale sent a school-wide email calling the matter confidential and affirming Ashford's commitment to balanced learning environments. Balanced. Daniel hated that word when used by cowards. His phone filled with messages. Some from former students. "We know who you are, Mr. Brooks. You changed my life. Don't let them lie." Some from strangers. "Leave kids alone. You people always make everything about race. Get a real job." Some from colleagues. "I'm so sorry. I wish I could say something." That last one hurt more than the insults. "I wish I could." Daniel sat in his apartment that night, reading the messages until the words blurred. His apartment was small, lined with books, plants, student thank you notes, and framed photographs of his parents. His father had driven a city bus for 32 years. His mother had been a public school librarian who believed books were doors poor children could open without asking permission. They were both gone now. But Daniel heard his mother clearly. "Baby, if they punish you for teaching children to think, make sure you keep thinking too." He called his attorney. Her name was Naomi Bell. Every serious black professional in the city seemed to have Naomi's number saved under emergencies. She was in her 50s, sharp, calm, and expensive in a way that made people reconsider lying before she finished sitting down. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Send me everything. I have lesson plans, emails, student work with names redacted, the leave letter, parent complaint summaries." Good. Do I have a case? Probably. Against the school? Possibly. Against the narrative? Definitely. Daniel leaned back. "I don't want to hurt the students. Then don't. But do not let adults hide behind them while destroying you. The investigation lasted 3 weeks. During that time, Daniel was not allowed on campus. His replacement was a retired administrator who showed documentaries and assigned safe essays about leadership. Parents praised the return to normal. Students stopped talking in class. At home, Daniel built a timeline. Every email, every lesson, every meeting, every parent complaint, every change in school language after donor pressure. Naomi filed a formal demand for preservation of records, including board communications, donor emails, complaint documents, and internal messages concerning Daniel's leave. The school's attorney responded politely and defensively, which Naomi described as the sound of people checking what they wrote when they thought no one would subpoena it. Then the children found their courage. It began with Maya Sterling. Maya was 17, brilliant, quiet, and raised to smile during cruelty if the cruelty came from someone older. Her grandfather had a building named after him at Ashford. Her mother chaired everything that involved flowers, money, or reputation. Maya had spent her whole life being praised for elegance when what she wanted was permission to be honest. The night Daniel was placed on leave, Maya opened her laptop and wrote a document titled What Actually Happened in Room 214. She did not post it. Not at first. She sent it to Elliot Graves. Elliot added his own account. Then Lucas. Then Sophia. Then William. Within 48 hours, 11 students had contributed sworn written statements describing Daniel's class, the discussions, the assignments, and the pressure they faced from their parents after asking uncomfortable questions at home. The statements were not childish protests. They were precise. Mr. Brooks never told me what to think about my family. He asked me to support my claims with evidence. My father said if I kept repeating Brooks' language, he would get Mr. Brooks fired. My mother told me to say I felt unsafe. I did not feel unsafe. I felt guilty because I had never thought about our housekeeper as a person with a life outside our home. Mr. Brooks stopped students from making personal attacks. He always said, critique choices, not people. The word dangerous was never used by students until parents used it first. Maya wrote the final line of her statement 3 times before leaving it as it was. The truth is that Mr. Brooks did not make us hate our families. He made it harder to lie for them. She sent the packet to Daniel from a new email address because she was afraid of violating school restrictions. She also sent it to Naomi Bell. Naomi called Daniel at 11:38 p.m. You need to read what the children wrote. Daniel opened the attachment. He read for an hour. Then he put his face in his hands. Not because he was relieved. Because children should not have had to rescue the adult in the room. The next morning, the students did something bigger. They walked out. Not all of them. 23. Then 40. Then 70. By noon, nearly 100 Ashford students were standing silently in the courtyard holding printed pages from their essays. No signs with slogans. No shouting. Just pages. Truth in their own handwriting. Maya stood at the front, trembling but upright. A local journalist, whose daughter attended Ashford on scholarship, received a tip and arrived before the administration could clear the courtyard. Cameras followed. Dr. Vale stepped outside and asked students to return to class. No one moved. Mrs. Carrington arrived 15 minutes later in a black SUV. She marched across the courtyard toward William. Get inside, she hissed. William looked terrified. Then he lifted his page and read aloud. My father says character matters in public and profit matters in private. I wrote this because I don't know which one he expects me to inherit. The courtyard went silent. Mrs. Carrington looked as if he had slapped her. Then Sophia Whitcomb read. My mother said Mr. Brooks made me ashamed of privilege. That is not true. He made me understand privilege is not the shame. Wasting it is. Lucas Pembroke stepped forward next. My father says poor families should move if they can't afford the neighborhood. Mr. Brooks asked me if the word afford means the same thing after someone raises the price on purpose. Richard Pembroke, who had arrived behind his wife, turned red. Lucas, he snapped. Lucas's voice shook but continued. I did not feel unsafe in Mr. Brooks's room. I felt unsafe at home after I said he was right to ask the question. That sentence changed everything. A camera captured it. By evening, the clip was everywhere. The narrative broke. The dangerous teacher became the teacher students defended. The rich parents became the adults caught using their children's discomfort as a weapon. Ashford Academy became the school that silenced a black educator after donor families complained their children were thinking too clearly. Dr. Vale called Daniel at 6:03 p.m. Daniel let it ring. Then Naomi called. Do not answer the school without me. I wasn't going to. Good. They're panicking. Daniel looked at the muted television showing footage of the courtyard. Their children, Naomi. They are young adults telling the truth. They shouldn't have to. No, she said. But when they do, adults should stop wasting it. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Friday. This time, Daniel did not sit alone. Naomi sat on his right. Two teachers sat behind him, finally brave enough after students had made courage fashionable. Several alumni attended. The journalist sat in the back. Parents filled the room again, but the energy had changed. Fear had moved tables. Dr. Vale opened with polished regret. The board recognizes that recent events have caused pain across our community. Naomi leaned toward Daniel and whispered, coward sentence. Daniel nearly smiled. Dr. Vale continued. We are committed to listening, healing, and restoring trust. Naomi whispered, 3 for 3. Then the board chair invited student representatives to speak. Maya stood first. Her mother sat rigid in the second row. Maya unfolded her statement. My name is Maya Sterling. I am a senior. I was in Mr. Brooks's literature seminar. I want to say clearly that he did not harm me. He protected our classroom from cruelty, laziness, and easy answers. The discomfort came from recognizing things I had been taught not to question. She looked at the board. When parents told you we were unsafe, did you ask us? Not them. Us? No one answered. Elliot spoke next. My father said Mr. Brooks was targeting successful families. But we were reading books. If a book about injustice feels like a personal attack, maybe the problem is not the teacher. A few students clapped before stopping themselves. Then Sophia read the line that would appear in every article the next morning. Mr. Brooks taught us that silence protects power. Then the adults proved him right. Dr. Vale closed his eyes. Thomas Graves stood suddenly. This is absurd, he said. These are children repeating language they were taught. Elliot turned toward him. No, Dad. We're children repeating truths you didn't want us to learn. The room erupted. Dr. Vale called for order. Naomi stood. The room quieted more quickly for her than for the headmaster. My client was placed on administrative leave without a finding of misconduct, after donor parents complained that students began asking difficult moral questions. The school allowed damaging implications to circulate publicly while restricting Mr. Brooks from defending himself. Now students have provided consistent statements contradicting the parent allegations. She placed a folder on the table. Additionally, records obtained through lawful demand show board members discuss donor retention, annual giving risks, and reputational exposure before reviewing classroom evidence. One message from a trustee reads, "We cannot let a literature teacher jeopardize the Carrington gift." Another states, Brooks is excellent, but replaceable. The board chair went pale. Naomi looked directly at him. Excellence is not replaceable when integrity is the thing being removed. Daniel sat still. His heart was beating hard. Naomi continued. Mr. Brooks is prepared to pursue all available claims. But he is also, despite my advice to be far less generous, committed to the students. So today, the question is simple: will Ashford Academy correct the lie it helped create, or will it continue teaching children that truth is only valued after donors approve? Silence. Then Dr. Vale spoke. Not to Daniel. To the board. I believe we mishandled this matter. That was too small, but it was the first crack. Mrs. Carrington stood. This school will lose families over this. Maya turned to her. Maybe it should lose the ones that require lies. Her mother stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. The board went into closed session. This time, Daniel did not wait in the hallway. Naomi insisted he remain seated until formally dismissed. That hallway was for when they thought you were alone, she said. He stayed. 2 hours later, the board returned. Daniel Brooks was reinstated. The school would issue a public apology. A review would be conducted into donor influence on academic decisions. Student statements would be included in the official record. The parent complaint would be closed with no finding of misconduct. Dr. Vale read the decision like a man swallowing stones. Daniel listened without expression. Then the board chair asked if he wished to return to teaching immediately. Daniel looked at the students. Maya. Elliot. Sophia. Lucas. William. Their faces were hopeful and frightened. He thought of his mother's library. His father's bus route. Every student who had trusted him before it was safe to do so. Every colleague who had waited too long. Every parent who had confused humiliation with control. Yes, he said. But not under the same conditions. The board chair blinked. Daniel stood. I want written academic freedom protections. A student advisory council with actual input. A policy requiring direct student interviews before parent allegations are used to remove a teacher from the classroom. Scholarship students included in all leadership programming, not separated for donor optics. And a public forum on power, education, and truth open to families, faculty, and students. Richard Pembroke scoffed. You think you can make demands after all this? Daniel turned to him calmly. No, Mr. Pembroke. I think I can make conditions before I lend my credibility back to an institution that borrowed it cheaply. Naomi's mouth twitched. The board did not agree that night. But they agreed within a week. Public pressure helped. So did alumni donors who had once been Daniel's students. They wrote letters. They threatened to withhold gifts. They spoke of him not as a controversy but as the first teacher who had made them feel morally awake. One alumna, now a civil rights attorney, wrote, Ashford taught me how to enter rooms of power. Mr. Brooks taught me what to do once I got there. The apology was published on a Tuesday morning. It was not perfect. Apologies drafted by committees rarely are. But it named harm. It cleared Daniel. It admitted the investigation had been influenced by pressure rather than evidence. It promised structural changes. Mrs. Carrington withdrew from the Gala Committee. Thomas Graves resigned from the advisory board. Richard Pembroke threatened to pull funding from the new athletics center. 3 other donors replaced it quietly after their children asked them not to embarrass the family further. Life did not become easy. Truth rarely produces instant harmony. Some parents removed their children from Daniel's class. Others requested him. Some colleagues avoided him because his reinstatement made their silence visible. Dr. Vale became painfully respectful. Naomi called that fear wearing a tie. Daniel returned to room 214 on a Monday. The students were already seated when he entered. No one spoke. On the board, someone had written his own classroom rule in careful letters: speak truthfully. Listen bravely. Daniel stood at the front of the room. For the first time since the board meeting, his composure nearly failed. He placed his worn leather bag on the desk. Then he turned to them. "I am proud of you," he said. Several students looked down. "But I am also sorry." Maya frowned. "Why?" "Because adults made you carry truth they should have been strong enough to hold." The room was quiet. Elliot raised his hand. Daniel nodded. "Does that mean we shouldn't have done it?" Daniel looked at him for a moment. "No," he said. "It means you should understand the cost, not just the courage." He walked to the board and wrote one sentence beneath the rule. "Courage is not noise. It is truth with consequences." Then he turned back. "Open your books." The class continued. Years later, people would talk about the scandal at Ashford Academy as if it had been clean and inevitable. The parents lied. The students spoke. The teacher returned. The institution changed. But Daniel knew better. Nothing about truth was inevitable. William nearly stayed silent. Sophia almost deleted her statement. Lucas threw up before reading his essay aloud in the courtyard. Maya did not speak to her mother for 3 months. Elliot's father cut off his summer travel money. Daniel received threats for another year. Naomi filed 2 more legal letters before the school learned how not to test her patience. Change came, but not like sunlight. More like a door forced open inch by inch. Still, the door opened. The public forum became an annual event. The Student Advisory Council grew teeth. Scholarship students were no longer displayed only when useful. Faculty gained stronger protections. Parents remained powerful, but less invisible in that power. Dr. Vale retired 18 months later to pursue consulting. Naomi sent Daniel a card that read, "Good." Daniel kept teaching. Not because Ashford deserved him. Because students did. On the last day of that senior seminar, Maya Sterling stayed after class. She had been accepted to 3 colleges and chosen Howard University, much to her mother's theatrical confusion. She stood by Daniel's desk holding a small wrapped gift. "You don't have to open it now," she said. Daniel smiled. "Thank you. I also wanted to say something." He waited. "When everything happened, I kept thinking courage would feel stronger. But I was scared the whole time." Daniel nodded. "That's usually how you know it's courage." She looked relieved. "My mother says you turned me against her." "Did I?" "No." Maya looked toward the window. "You turned me toward myself. She just happened to be standing in the way." Daniel said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Be careful with truth, Maya. Not timid. Careful. It can cut chains, but it can also cut people if you swing it wildly." She nodded. "I know." After she left, Daniel opened the gift. It was a framed copy of the classroom rule, handwritten and signed on the back by every student in the seminar. Speak truthfully. Listen bravely. Underneath, Maya had added one line. "Thank you for hearing us before we knew how to speak." Daniel hung it above his desk. 5 years later, he became head of the English department. 3 years after that, he founded the Brooks Institute for Ethical Literacy, a summer program that brought together students from private schools, public schools, and community organizations to study literature, history, power, and public responsibility. Ashford hosted it. That irony was not lost on him. At the opening session, Daniel stood before a room filled with teenagers from every kind of background: rich, poor, scholarship, legacy, immigrant, first generation, overconfident, invisible, wounded, brilliant, bored, afraid. He looked at them and saw every student he had ever taught. Then he said, "This program will not tell you what to think. It will ask you whether your thinking can survive evidence, empathy, and consequence." A hand rose in the back. A boy wearing a blazer too large for him asked, "What if our parents don't like what we learn?" A few students laughed nervously. Daniel smiled. Then learn carefully enough that when you speak, you are not just rebelling. You are telling the truth. Years after the humiliation, years after the rich parents tried to end his career, years after their children revealed the truth, Daniel still remembered sitting alone at that long boardroom table while powerful adults called him dangerous. They had been wrong. But not completely. A teacher who helps children think is dangerous to every lie depending on inheritance. A teacher who asks for evidence is dangerous to every family myth built on silence. A teacher who refuses to bow politely while being falsely accused is dangerous to every room that mistakes money for authority. Daniel Brooks had been humiliated by rich parents. Their children had revealed the truth. And the truth, once spoken in young voices, did what Daniel always believed literature could do. It made silence impossible to keep.